Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to make some ornaments, but they're a little unconventional. I was at a Christmas party and we did an ornament exchange, but the goal was to bring the ugliest ornament that you could find. So I wasn't able to find many, and I just decided to go ahead and make some. And what I decided to do is just make some snowman ornaments, but make them ugly snowmen. And some of them actually turned out cute, and my husband said he thought that they would sell because they were so ugly that they were cute. So I ended up making several, and I'm only going to have 4 to show in my end picture, but I actually made several that you will see. So I made a couple of different shapes, one with a 3-tiered snowman and then one with a 2-tiered snowman. And what I did was I traced those on to some muslin fabric, and then I sewed them together on the sewing machine. Now you could sew these by hand. You could even glue these, especially the ones that I'm not turning right side out. So this one here is, when I sewed it together, I went ahead and put a piece of jute string in the top to use as a hanger, and this one also. So these are going to be turned or just left like this and not turned. And what I'm doing is I'm just cutting the edge really close to my seam, but then I'm just going to take a finger sander and just really fray up those edges. So this is the easiest way to do them, and I really like the look of these. I actually ended up doing most of them this way, but some of them I turned inside out, and I could have added the hanger to those also, but I just decided on those to just leave them without a hanger and add the hanger later. Again, I stitched mine up on the sewing machine, but I didn't take my time and really sew it very carefully so that the shape was just perfect, because again, these are going to be ugly snowmen. So I'm going to like the different shapes that I get. As you can see here, the shoulder on the left is lower than the one on the right. And I think that that's going to just add some extra character to him. So I'm stuffing these pretty well. I'm not going to stuff them terribly tight, but I want to make sure and get plenty in the neck area and make that more stiff so that the neck doesn't fall over. Now I guess you could do one where the neck does fall over, and that would just add some more character to them. But for me, I just made sure to get that stuffed really well, but not so much that I couldn't stitch up the bottom. And it's very easy to stitch up the bottom when you're leaving it where the wrong side is out, because you just have to stitch right over the top of that. You don't have to turn that in first. And this is one that I turned, and like I said, for this one, I think that it's better if you machine stitch it, but you can hand stitch it and just make sure you have your stitches pretty tight so that you can turn it and it will look right. I wouldn't do them like this using hot glue, because I don't think that would work well at all. So now that I have some of these stuffed and stitched up on the bottom, I'm going to start to work on them one at a time. And for this one, I want it to be, actually for most of these, I used some distress ink and just really grunged them up. Now you could skip this step if your muslin fabric was already coffee stained, and actually I think that would be a better look. So, or you could water down some paint and paint these. But I'm just using some distress ink on mine and just grunging them up until I feel like they have the look that I'm going for. And then I thought about here just using this Sharpie and making the eye that way. I'm just doing an X for the eye. So I end up taking some embroidery thread in black and going over that to give it more character. Now for the eyes on this one, I'm taking some buttons that have kind of a rounded top. The top of it is not flat at all. And I'm going to try to make these look like little eyeballs. And this may not appeal to many of you, but I thought they turned out really cute. So for the eyeball, what I decided to do was take one that was white and draw a large circle of a certain color on it. And then I'm going to take a Sharpie and go around the edge of that once it dries well and kind of outline that circle. And then I'm going to draw or color a pupil, a black pupil in the center, and make these look like actual eyeballs. So most of these I don't want to have matching eyeballs, and actually in the case of this one, I'm just going to do one eyeball and then one X for the eye. So what I did was I just found not all of my buttons, but I just went through and found several buttons that had that rounded shape at the top and had the color that I needed. If I didn't have the color, I could have painted the white and then did this, but I just found several that I thought would work, and I just made some up ahead so that I would have them when I went to put these together. So after I did this pupil in the center, I just dotted a little eye or a little white dot in the center to give the eye kind of a twinkle and make it look a little bit more realistic. And then I clear coated them to give them somewhat of a sheen. And then because most of these that I found weren't flat on the back, and I just went ahead and cut a little hole in my muslin and put some glue in there, and then just kind of push that eye back inside really well so that it didn't stick out quite as bad. The reason that I wanted these is so that it did kind of stick out a little bit. I just felt like it added to their ugliness. Turns out it made them actually look kind of cute. But I pushed that back in and held it until I made sure that it wasn't kind of dangling out. Now these you could take just about as far as you want. You could just add all kinds of things to these to make them ugly or to give them character. They could just be funny little snowmen instead. And on this one, I decided to take a colored pencil and just kind of make little squiggly red lines in the white part of the eye, and then once I finished that, I had to clear coat over that again to make sure that it didn't rub off, but that just kind of gave it a little bit more character to the eye and made it look a little bit more ugly, I guess. So here I am stitching that cross for the eye, and then instead of making a knot on the eye part, I just decided to go ahead and bring it down to the mouth and make a little stitched mouth also. And when I did the stitching on these faces, rather than hiding the knots most of the time, I just let the knots show because I felt like that just added even more character. And then for this one, I just added a couple little buttons on the front. And I just applied those to the body with some hot glue. And then I just took a little torn strip of fabric. And I think that I just used something that I had cut from an old shirt. And And here, I didn't realize this, but here I am adding a little bit of fabric behind the button to give it some extra dimension and character. And then I just glued that on top of the fabric. Now, for the strip of fabric, again, I just cut this from an old shirt, and I grunged it up a little bit more with some distress ink. And now I'm just going to tie that around the neck. Now, I always tear these strips because to me it just gives them a much better look than if I were to cut them with scissors. And then after I tied this and cut it the length that I felt like it needed to be, then I took my scissors and just pulled at those edges so that they would be really, really frayed. And then I cut probably about an 8-inch piece of jute twine and tied a knot in the end of it, and then glued that knot to the top of the head, because I'm going to be adding something to its head to hide that anyway. So you really don't have to add these before you turn them or before you sew them, because you can just hide that with some kind of embellishment. And in this case, I just cut a little piece of cheesecloth and kind of wadded it up and glued it to the top of the head. And that just kind of made it look like a little bit of hair or just something to kind of rough up the top of his head. So it could be hair, or it could just be just because. And here I'm adding some to the bottom of the snowman also. And here is what the first one looked like. Again, you could just add so much to these, but this is what the first one looked like complete. And now this was one that I left the wrong side out on and left the seam showing. And again, I am grunging this one up with the distress ink as well. And now I'm gluing one of those eyes on here. And I'm stitching the cross for an eye on this one as well. This one is going to be pretty similar to the last one that I did. But I realized on this one that I didn't do a nose on the last one. So for the nose on both, I'm just going to take some orange paint, and I'm using the color terracotta because it's just kind of a muted orange. And I'm just going to draw a little nose on both of these. Now the nose adds a lot of character because you can make it a tiny nose, or you can make a big nose, and you can kind of play with the shape and the direction that the nose is going and add a lot more character. Now I know it's a little late to be doing Christmas ornaments because most people already have their tree up. But you could do some for next year, or again, just for the reason that I made these. Maybe you have a Christmas party to go to. Maybe it isn't even an ugly ornament party, but you want to bring an ugly ornament. And I find that ones like these that are just so different from everyone else's are very popular anyway. So, but these would also make cute little gifts, or you could leave a hanger off and you could use these as stocking stuffers. I think it's always cute to have something kind of popping out of the top of the stocking, and I think these would be real cute for that. Now, for some of the buttons that I added to these, I always like or most of the time, I like when I'm adding buttons for them to have some thread left on them, some of the old buttons, and you don't get many like that. So I just decided to add a little contrast by threading some of this black thread through these and just kind of cutting it off, but leaving somewhat of a tail. And I just feel like that adds a lot of character also. And so that's how I did some of these. Now, if you had some really crazy colored fabrics, you could add some character to these by just putting some little crazy fabric scarves on these and giving them more of a goofy look. rather than ugly, I guess. And I think most of these were more goofy looking than ugly anyway. Then for the scarf on this one, I just cut a piece of cheesecloth and tied around the neck. And I also decided to add some arms on this one. So I just took some sticks and took my scissors and made a little hole in the sides where I wanted to glue my arms, and just glued them at different lengths, where this one on this side was a little taller or a little higher. The one on the other side I brought down lower. Now the next snowman turned out with a pretty abnormal shape, especially one side of his head. And as I mentioned before, I didn't mind that at all. I just feel like it made him look even stranger, which was good. And I just kind of worked with that. So already you have a character trait that you could work with. And the more that I looked at him, he became a she, because I see a little old lady who is hunched over in this one. So I took a little piece of fabric and started working with it to see how I could make it look like a scarf. And I kind of put that one on hold and decided to go ahead and make a little shawl. So I tied a little shawl around her, and now you can see that it looks like a little hunched over old lady snowman. Actually, snow lady. Then after I did that, and I added a couple of buttons to that, I also decided that I wanted some lace on her. So I took a piece of lace and cut it to fit around the shawl, and then just kind of glued that over the top. And then instead of adding a scarf, I decided to take some hot glue and just keep wrapping around the head until I had her head covered to look like gray hair. And so I just glued that all the way around it. It just kept gluing it in place until the whole thing was covered. And then I added a little wadded up piece of this twine and made a little bun. And it wasn't perfect at all, but these are supposed to be ugly snowmen, so I feel like it worked. And I could have added a scarf to this to distract from its imperfection, but again, I just didn't feel like that imperfection was a problem. And then for this one, I decided to put a little bit of dark fabric back behind the eyes. Don't ask me why. I just thought it would add some contrast and some interest to her. But I quickly decided it was too much contrast, so I took a little piece of that cheesecloth and added to the top of that, and then I added my eye on. I could see this as a fun activity, maybe a family activity or an activity with friends, where you make several of these up ahead, already stuffed and ready to go. And then you could maybe have a contest to see who could make theirs the ugliest or the silliest or whatever you decide to do with them. I could just see that being a fun activity. In hindsight, this one would have been cute with some little wire spectacles on her. And here I'm adding a little more cheesecloth on her and some on the other side. And then I just rolled up a little piece of fabric in kind of a triangle shape and cut a flat side to it and glued that on to make her nose. And then I just trimmed it the size that I wanted after it was glued on well, and then took some fabric, or it took some paint and painted it. And I wanted to add some arms to this one because, again, I felt like she was really hunched over, and I felt like she needed a cane. So I put the arms in and positioned them where she could be walking with a cane. And I didn't have actual twigs for her arms. I just had some grapevine. So what I did was I could have went outside, but it was raining this day, and I didn't want it to. I didn't want to have to wait on anything to dry. So I took some of the thinner grapevine and wrapped around where the hands would be to give more of an illusion of hands. And then I twisted another one to look like a cane and glued that to her hand and also to the side of her body. I'm not sure if she looks like a snowman at all. She may look more like a chicken to me because of that nose, but I still think she's cute. Now, I don't know if I mentioned that I took my little finger sander and the ones that the seam was showing on, I really roughed those seams up. Then as I started to do these, I made them a little bit more ugly because when my husband saw them, he said that he knows the intention was for ugly, but they were actually kind of cute, and I wanted to make some of them really ugly. So I took some extra steps in doing that. And here I'm adding some cheesecloth on the face. And I did 2 of the little eyes that pop out, and instead of 1, but I did them in 2 different colors. And then I took a little piece of muslin fabric and cut a tiny half circle and glued it around the top of the left eye to make it look like a baggy little eyelid. And then after I attached the eyelid, and as you can see here, you don't have to be perfect with this at all. I'm just kind of pinching it into the shape that I want and just adding hot glue until I get it all in place. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect at all. You want this to be kind of a messy, baggy little eyelid. And then I wadded up some thread and glued to make it look like eyebrows. And I feel like I'm getting a little bit more ugly out of this one. And I used some fabric on this one to fashion a little nose as well. And again, it didn't need to be perfect. I liked that it was very imperfect. And then I just added a little crumpled up piece of cheesecloth to the front of this one so that it would be behind all of the buttons. And I took some scissors and trimmed it until I got the look that I wanted. And then I glued a few buttons in place. And as you can see here, I'm using buttons that have the thread left on them already. And then I took some embroidery thread and made his mouth. And then after I stitched on his mouth, and again on this one I left the knot showing on purpose, then I painted the nose. And for the mouth on this one, I gave him a frown, and I think that really added to his look. And then I just took a piece of an old shirt that I had torn strips from and grunged it up with my antiquing ink and made him a little grungy scarf. And I don't know if I mentioned here, but I've glued some fabric down on the bottom of the body as well. I don't know how I missed that in my video. And I really like how this one turned out. And I love the exaggerated different colors on the eyes. And I could have put the eyelid on both sides of this one, but I kind of like him with just the one. It almost makes him look like he has a black eye or something. Now, although I didn't show myself making this next one, I want to show you guys how I packaged them for resale. So I just made sure to make the arms small enough that they would fit in these small cellophane bags that you get at Walmart. And I'm just going to put that in there and then take a folded piece of cardstock and with a little tag stuck on it that says Ugly Snowmen, and then I just staple that over the top. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I package especially ornaments up like this, they seem to sell so much better for me. Now, I'm sorry I didn't get to film this one, but I think I got the ugly on this one. So I made a little hat just from some fabric, and I cut some little pieces from a fabric glue stick and made the little teeth and glued those on. So I think that this one turned out the ugliest. And I think that this one was definitely more cute than ugly. But whether you make them cute, silly, or ugly, they are definitely very fun to make. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.